Borderlands show, and I'm here today with very excited about today's guest, Sergey Yanchuk, who is a member of the Resistance, which I just learned a lot about from speaking to him, and I want to give Sergey the chance to introduce himself and explain it. Sergey, tell us more, and just before I let Sergey go on with this, there was a widespread assumption before the war started that the only feasible path to victory for Ukraine was a resistance movement, because it was assumed that the Russian army would quickly overwhelm the government and the Ukrainian military, which is not actually what's happening right now in the field. It's obviously a tough fight, and that could well happen, and it has happened in some places of Ukraine, but it's also not a foregone conclusion. But Sergey, why don't you tell us about yourself, and what is the resistance movement you're in, and how long have you been in it, and how long has this movement existed? And just lost Sergey for just a moment, so I just want to make sure that we get back. Sorry about that. So okay. Sergey, welcome back.
Yeah.
I thought the question scared you, but you're back. So tell me, what is the resistance movement? When did this start? How long have you been in it, and what's the story here?
Well, it's a unity. First, it's non-partisan unity of different NGOs, civil society groups.
We lost him again there. Hold on.
Well, I don't know what's going on, but yeah. And veterans, volunteers who join the cause, which is of mutual interest. It's a free, independent, sovereign state of Ukraine. So I can say that as a movement, it emerged back in 2019, when there was a time of Paris summit, Normandy summit in Paris, where Zelensky was about, as we believed, and we had some grounds to believe that, was about to endorse Steinmeier formula, which actually paves the way to implement Minsk agreement. And you know that Minsk agreement is stipulated in a way to destroy our sovereignty altogether. That's why we gathered, and the call for gathering was spread all over the social networks. For example, I came with my son and like-minded people, all veterans, and we decided to stay as long as it is needed to safeguard our sovereignty. And also we send a signal to both our president and Putin. So if Zelensky decided on signing that agreement with Putin, so we would definitely not let him back in the country. So we made kind of night watch just in front of the president's office. So the first rally in the day, it was around 10,000 people, and at night 3,000 decided to stay and see what's going to happen. So the President Zelensky at that time in Paris, he told his counterparts that, you see what is going on in Kiev. If I sign anything, I won't be able to come back to my country. So we did that, and I believe that it goes to our merit first.
Yeah, and this is a really interesting point. A lot of people leading up to the war in the media were talking about the Minsk agreement was really the pathway out of the Russian aggression. And why did your group form to stop the Minsk agreement? What is the reason why you viewed this as absolutely not acceptable for a Ukrainian president to enter into?
Well, the matter is that Ukrainian president and Ukrainian people are two different things. Maybe you remember from the previous history, yeah? When the President Yanukovych decided to go in absolutely different direction. Well, he pledged to join the European Union, and instead of doing that, he just decided to go all the way around. So we also expected the same from this president, who, frankly speaking, is more pro-Russian, especially at that time, than pro-Western. So we decided to help him, to back him up. Let's put it mildly, as to back him up and to show it as a leverage at the discussion, at the negotiation table, like showing to Putin. And you know that Minsk agreement was formed in a way to destroy our country gradually, but definitely. So first demand is federalization, and also we have to recognize officially two entities like breakaway provinces, but actually they are not breakaway provinces, they were taken from us because many people left those provinces, more than 2 or 3, I believe 3 million people left. So it speaks in favor of Ukraine, not in favor of Russia. If everything is like they say, they would definitely stay.
Got it. So, what's your background? What did you do before you joined the resistance? Were you in the Ukrainian army before, or what's your background before this?
Yeah, I was drafted, so it was conscript army back in the day, in 1999, just after receiving my diploma. And I still remember that time. It was a little bit different to transfer mentally from let's say, learning how to teach people, how to teach kids, and put on BDU. Well, it was not even a BDU, it was Soviet time BDU. And then I signed the contract in a year and participated in a NATO-sponsored program, Partnership Peace, if you know what I'm talking about. And I volunteered for that program and was selected to undergo on-the-job training in the United States. So first, it was started with a Defense Language Institute at Texas Air Force Base, Lackland. Then it was Sergeant's Academy in Louisiana. And after that, it was, let's say, honing my skills with 82nd Airborne Division, Fort Bragg. So after that, I also took part in peacekeeping mission in Kosovo for a year, and then resigned and started teaching kids.
Wait, you were an officer in the army, right?
No, sergeant. So I'm E5 according to American system because I graduated from American Sergeant School in Louisiana, Camp Cook, and NCO battalion, and after that. Also, I was promoted to like staff sergeant, something like that, Ukrainian system.
Well, you have a lot of good training because I know the American Sniper School. I sent 10 of my soldiers there, and I was really glad that I had them in Iraq, as it's one of the best schools in the Army for sure. And so you got some great training in America. Congratulations.
So it was really great, and not only military training. I am also thankful for cultural awareness because while staying in the United States, they organized like cultural tours for us, for sergeants from Ukraine and other countries. So we visited a lot of places, and also we got kind of insights into American life, especially in different states, in Texas. Well, I love Texas very much because it looks like western part of Ukraine. So people who believe that they are like best quality Ukrainians, like Texans, believe that they are the best quality Americans. So it's really simple. And in Louisiana, also, I saw a lot of lively people who are proud to have some French heritage, despite the fact that none of them speaks French, but they are proud of their French last names.
I grew up in Louisiana, and now I'm a Texas resident, so I know exactly what you're talking about. But yeah, so I'm I'm Texan. Well, right now I'm Texan in terms of my company address. I still have my home address in Louisiana, and it's about an hour from Fort Polk.
And in North Carolina, I remember international festival which annually takes place at the square, which was used for selling slaves, and this is quite a symbolic thing. And I still remember that it showed that we can all live in peace. We can all tolerate each other unless we infringe on each other's freedom. So I like that in that sense. It was a great example.
Well, it's interesting. American slaves were emancipated around the exact same year that Russian Empire serfs were also freed. So America and Russian Empire were the last ones that had a slavery system, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, so, Ukraine never had slavery and never tolerated slavery.
Well, Shevchenko was speaking out against it, but I agree. So Ukrainians themselves, but under the Russian Empire, I guess it was imposed a bit.
Slavery was imposed on us, but only on a part of Ukraine, the east part of Ukraine. So the west part of Ukraine was not enslaved, but it was serfdom, I would say. Not slavery, but serfdom under Austrian and Hungarian Empire. So it was a little bit. It was not so harsh like Russia.
Yeah, not like the Russian side. And for those of you who are wondering today why there's differences in Ukraine. Ukraine used to be divided between the Austro-Hungarian Empire and the Russian Empire, and also the Polish Empire before that disappeared. So. So it's got a very complicated history, which creates different linguistic and cultural backgrounds across the country.
Yes, we had the same bloody history with Poland. Well, you know that there were many wars with Poland, but now I still remember the words of my battalion commander, who was Polish. It was battalion, Ukrainian battalion, Polish-Ukrainian battalion with Lithuanian platoon. And he always, when we encountered a dispute between Albanians and Serbs, he always set us as an example, like saying, look, we are a battalion which consists of two nations which used to kill each other and spill each other's blood for centuries. And now we act together like peacekeepers, so we want to establish peace in this place. And we can show you that this is possible. It's possible to forget the feud and start from a scratch. And really, that was a good example. Which is
and where was this, where you served under a Polish battalion?
Say again?
When did you serve in this Polish battalion? You had a Ukrainian platoon?
In 2001, 2002.
In Kosovo?
All year and 5 days.
Where, in Kosovo or in Poland?
Kosovo, former Yugoslavia.
Got it. Yeah. Peacekeeping mission down there. We were going to go there. I was actually in the U.S. Army in Germany around the same time, and we were going to go to Kosovo, and then the Iraq War started. So we got diverted to Turkey during that.
Many of our guys went to Iraq.
Yeah. Well, that built a lot of bonds between the Americans and Ukrainians that are still there.
That's true.
So let's talk about Vilna, Ukraine, or Vilna, Ukraine. What is the Free Ukraine movement? And approximately, without giving too much away, how many people would you say are in the organization?
Well, as we have already mentioned, it started back in 2019, but not from scratch. Actually, it transformed into that organization, or unit. I would not call it an organization that time, maybe unity, volunteer unity, but it takes its roots from Maidan. So it was called Vilni Люди in Ukrainian, in English, Free People. So it was Free People movement. Actually, members of that movement took part in the Revolution of Dignity, which took place in Ukraine back in 2013. And now we can see that it develops further. So we decided to drop skip the word capitulation, because now it's not so topical. So what is, actually it is topical, but not so much. So we decided to put a little bit different emphasis. So now we still watch our president, our government, but we have common enemy. So we have to unite. We have to back up our government, our president, as long as he acts in the best interest of Ukraine. And we are going to do that. And we already are doing that. So now the name is changed a bit. So it's a resistance movement, Free Ukraine. And let's say a week ago, it was like 500 members, around 500 members. And during the first week of war, it doubled. Now it's like more than 1,000, and it keeps increasing. So our ranks are swelling really fast. So what we did actually, in order not to be destroyed overnight, we created non-leader form of non-leader form structure. I would call it network. So, you know, everything which is strictly hierarchical can be easily ruined, destroyed, bribed, threatened, you know. But when you have a network, it replicates. You kill one part, the other part revives. So it's like Ukrainian insurgent army back in the day when it fought both Nazi forces, Soviet forces, Polish army. So it had enemies all around. Well, it has its advantages. You don't need to aim. You shoot just any direction and you engage an enemy. So that's the military humor. Yeah.
So you're a small organization, but you're growing, and obviously that's a result of the war. And you're on duty right now. Or what is your role during the war in your organization?
Well, my first duty was pulling sentry service at one of our governmental building of a great significance. I cannot name it right now. After the war, I'm gonna tell that, because I was not allowed even to step over the threshold of that building. And now we work in close coordination with governmental agencies, with Security and Defense Council of Ukraine, with Security Service of Ukraine, police, National Guard, the army. So mostly with the army, not with the whole, you know, military armed forces of Ukraine. Yes, and what we do is we establish recruiting centers in major cities of Ukraine, which attract volunteers from different walks of life. Mostly we attract people with combat experience, but only those people who are not eligible to mobilization, you know, because we have Operational Reserve 1, Operational Reserve 2, and reservists. So reservists usually fill the ranks of territorial defense, but territorial defense mostly performs the functions of police, so they enforce the police. And National Guard is also doing a great job by protecting the critical infrastructure sites, like the one which was targeted today near Zaporizhia.
Yeah.
So what we are doing, we gather those people who are not fit for the military, who are not fit even for territorial defense. For example, yesterday I registered one more platoon from the city of Vinnytsia, and I would tell you that half of them was born back in 50s, 60s, but with great combat experience dating back to Afghanistan war, to Chechen campaign. So they fought on different sides, but their eyes, you know, are burning with that fire of revenge, because Russians are plundering our country. And you know what? Today I finally met my friend whom I served with back in the day in Kosovo and in Ukraine. He came from Ireland. Now we call him Irish. So he's Ukrainian, but he migrated to Ireland many years ago, like 20 years ago, and he has Irish citizenship. So for us, it's not a problem if the person is not a citizen of Ukraine. We are not red tape. We do not bother ourselves with some bureaucratic obstacles, hurdles. So we welcome full-heartedly everyone who joins us.
And what do you see? What is your organization's role? Because you have the army, which fights. You have the territorial defense, which is doing critical infrastructure and checkpoints and kind of static defense of key infrastructure, because that frees the army up to go maneuver and react. And what's your role?
I understand the question. It's absolutely logical. Well, one of the provisions of the new law, which entered force back on the 1st of January this year, it says that the national resistance in total is divided into territorial defense units and territorial defense forces. Unfortunately, not a system, but still forces, which are subordinated to the military directly, yes, to the head of the general staff. And we have resistance movement which can stay even during occupation and fight. So our tactic is more like guerrilla tactic. So what we teach people is hit and run tactic, stealing and kidnapping some high-profile officials or military commanders. So it's subversive activity. It's reconnaissance. Yes, it's providing our military with the eyes on the ground. So we receive a lot. We have a lot of informants all over the place, like in the territory of Ukraine, and we constantly receive like tons of information data on where that military Russian column went, in what direction, how many vehicles, and blah blah blah. And then we pass that information up the chain of command. So it's not just something which we like to do and we gather like-minded people. No, it's closely coordinated with the military and with all the services like security service, police, National Guard, and others.
Understood. All right. So in your view of the war, I think we were talking about this earlier, when a certain area of the country gets occupied, your organization stays there and they start to operate against supply columns and you name it. They're doing things that make it very hard to hold territory. Would that be why the Russian supplies are having a hard time getting to the vehicles right now?
That's the point, and that's what we're doing the best. We do not hit the armor fists. We hit logistic links. So it's the easiest way. And then those tanks just run out of fuel. They cannot find it in the vicinity. And even common people, if you know, they just beat the shit out of those tanks and drivers and occupied tanks. We love that even gypsies stole several of them. And even thugs. There are some, let's say, districts in Kiev who are infamous for some thugs, and they also grabbed one tank for themselves. So now it's funny because Russian military actually adds to our armory and our inventory with their own assets, especially armored assets. So this is nice.
I heard today a statistic, and you tell me if this is true. The Ukrainian army has acquired more vehicles in the last eight days than they've acquired in the last 8 years since the war started. And it's a gift from Russia. And if they don't leave the territory soon, I heard you guys might start reclaiming lands from Kiev and Rus, because let's remember history here. Let's remember that you used to own a lot of Russia centered out of Kiev. So
unfortunately, we cannot do the same with helicopters in planes. They just drop down and break it apart.
Exactly. All right. So that's good to hear. I'm glad to hear that you're happy with the role that you're playing in the war. And what's your specific role in the war?
Well, right now, I can say that it is so flexible. It's it's not like a rigid structure like you have in the military, you know. For example, today my role is S1 officer, despite the fact that I'm not even an officer. I'm just sergeant in both armies, United States and Ukrainian. So the next day I perform the role of liaison officer. Then I do something else. So I can pull sentry. I can do actually anything what it takes to defend my country. So the only thing which I really discussed is a duty at kitchen. And you have to cook meals and fix the dishes. That's one. It's unacceptable for me. Everything else is okay.
That was always punishment in the American Army. Is if you're washing dishes, you know that you've done something wrong. So.
I know that because I did that already, and I was punished for a week staying in the kitchen in Kosovo, and you know the temperature was so high, so the place was smelling. I remember that. Really
the worst duty in the army. Sergey, what were you doing on the first day of the war? And let me ask you this: as someone who's part of the resistance, did you know, or did you believe that the war was coming? Yes or no?
I was preparing for that several years, and now it happened. Not a big surprise. I can tell you even more. On the eve of the invasion, I read, I believe it was CNN article that invasion is imminent in 48 hours. So I just went to sleep, and I had a deep sleep until my neighbor just knocked on my door saying that there are some explosions rumble around. I said, so what? So if it is going to hit you, it hits you anyway. Let's go down to the basement. Everyone goes down to the basement. Guys, just let me alone. No, there's no point. You cannot run from that thing because the building crumbles down. And you will suffer a little bit longer. So that's the only point. So I told him, just forget about me. Don't knock on my door. Leave me alone. I waited. I have been waiting for that like several years. Not happy. I was not looking forward, but I was expecting it to escalate, you know. And I just fell back to sleep.
And were you in Lviv, or where were you? Lviv or Kiev?
Say again?
What town were you in? Lviv or Kiev?
No. I'm in Kiev now.
Okay, but on the first day of the war?
Yes, on the first day of the war, I was in Kiev, but on the second day, there was a great threat that we can be not maybe encircled fully, but enveloped.
Yeah.
So the envelope was quite possible, and we decided to relocate our headquarters to Lviv and establish a recruiting center there. So it was the first one. Next day we had the other one in another city, and now it like bubble up everywhere. So we set an example. It proved to be working one, so now it works really well. Well, I can tell you that going from Kiev, it left some very long-lasting impressions on me because I love this city and I understand the significance, culture, historic, whatever, and living it, like driving, looking around, because the city was full of subversive forces, Russian subversive forces. So we were driving with our rifles put out into windows, and we were looking at every car which was nearby, because on our car we had a huge emblem of one of volunteer battalion. It looks like, or it can be compared to something when you put a huge target on your forehead. So it was the same, and it was spooky, definitely. But when we went to Lviv, you know, that feeling actually, let's say, down somehow, and then something jumped like adrenaline rush, something then, and we became very edgy on coming back. So I took my first opportunity with the first platoon, which was gathered quite fast. I just jumped in the car and we went back. But on the way back, also very, very unbelievable impressions we can have. Unfortunately, I was not allowed to take pictures because on all the way from Lviv to Kiev, locals established roadblocks, checkpoints together with police, with national government. and they manned them with their hunting rifles even. And the closer you are getting to Kiev, the faces were more and more, strained, intense. And I saw the kids together with their mothers, with their grandfathers, they were dragging and rolling tires just to establish some kind of a barrier in order to put it on fire. Yeah, and everyone waved at us. They checked our documents, but when they saw that the column is going with volunteers back to Kiev, and everyone is fleeing from Kiev, everyone is leaving, and like people are going back with self-confidence on their faces. They were happy. Their eyes were tearful, and we also wait all the way. I had a great desire to take a picture of that, to shoot some footage, to shoot some video, but it's absolutely forbidden. If you do that, you can be taken for diversionist, subversive agents. And that day when we arrived, there were so many cases, more than 20, or some people say even more, 20 cases of friendly fire. So when we approached Kiev, it was the first roadblock just in front of the city, and in 20 meters before, in front of our car, 2 police officers in full uniform were shot by the National Guard soldiers, the conscripts. They were young, they were jumpy, and they were fast on trigger. So 4 of them shoot them in point blank distance, like 5 meters distance, just for being not very polite to them. So my advice to everyone who goes in the opposite direction, for who flees Kyiv, who tries to evacuate, well, if there is a roadblock, if there is a checkpoint, stop, perform everything which they tell you. If you have a gun, even registered gun in your car, tell that fact to police officer or National Guard trooper, and step back from the car, show your hands all the time. If they tell you just present your document or something like that, do it slowly with your hands here, for example. Do not try to move around. Fidgeting is not a good idea. Yeah? Because why? The matter is that subversive groups, Russian subversive groups, which entered the city on the first day of war, they were so numerous and so creative, I would say. It goes against all the rules of war. So mostly they disguised themselves as police officers, as National Guard officers. So they got as close as possible to the roadblock or to a checkpoint and shot everyone who was manning that point blank really fast. And they even disguised themselves as medical staff, as doctors. So they grabbed some ambulances. And also tried to present them as doctors. For example, we are rushing with the patient, please let us through, but when you come closer to that ambulance, they open the door and shoot you right in the face. So that's why these young guys who man the checkpoints, they are really, really jumpy. So please keep that in mind.
And let's talk about inside of Kiev, because you've been there since the second day. And talking about subversive activities, President Zelensky, they say, has had 3 assassination attempts against him foiled because of tips from the Russian FSB. What do you know about subversive activities and the countermeasures being inside of Kiev? What does your organization know, and how is the security inside of Kiev now?
Kiev is a huge city, and it's really difficult to control everyone. Just before the war, they had, I believe, they infiltrated a lot of operatives, and also they had sleeping cells, and they used churches and monasteries which are controlled by Moscow Patriarchate, and there are a lot of such cases, so many places to hide, which are never inspected by the police. So that's why it happened it was like an avalanche. So you expect to encounter that subversive group face to face at every corner, because was really difficult situation. So that caused that panic. I believe that subversive groups caused more panic than airstrikes themselves. And and referring to those assassination attempt, I know nothing about that, so it's not my pay grade, as we say in the United States. So I can only stipulate about something, but well, it is possible. There is such a possibility because Russians have, they have multiple scenarios. They have different stages. For example, if one stage fails, they switch to the other. They do it quickly. Actually, Putin is a great tactician, adventurer, not as brave as Hitler, but maybe not brave, but daring. Yes, but Putin is more cautious. So he makes a step and looks what happens. If they let me go, I make the other one. So that's his tactics, his beloved tactics. And the same is done here. But also we have to remember that this is a legacy of empire. And in empire, they never take care of people, of their lives. They don't care of their soldiers. So they send them, like head-on attack, like it was back in 100 years ago, and they die. And they send again the new wave and the new wave, and also they die too. No one cares about that. So I can only imagine what can happen if they occupy us. They will exterminate us like they did with that artificial famine back in 1933.
And you probably have seen those reports that have leaked into the media of Russia's plan for the occupation of Ukraine. You're probably on one of those kill lists already, I would imagine. So there's a lot of very tough measures that are planned for Ukraine in the event of a full occupation, and you obviously know that, and that's what you're training to fight.
Well, I can see a very nice example. They have already established not a concentration, I would call it a torture camp, right within the city limits of Donetsk. They use the former compound of a plant or factory, which is called isolation, izolatsiya. Yes, so they torture people. They put them in basement, in different cells, which are not for people but for some stuff. So no sanitation at all, and their tortures they remind of something like Inquisition back in the middle centuries. So they're very creative in that stuff. Well, they cannot produce, computer and cell phone, but they're very creative as for tortures. So I also know that they have some plans of setting up concentration camps for such guys like me, and then exterminating them quietly, or maybe taking them to Siberia, where you will never find even a trace of a person. So there is such a possibility. Plus, I also believe, and I have some grounds to believe, that they were planning to put some, let's say, to instill some puppet government with pro-Russian politicians, and unfortunately, we still have a lot of them. Mm-hmm. I don't call them names because everyone knows those bastards. And they are traitors. They definitely traitors.
And where do you see the war going? Do you see a partial or full occupation coming, or do you think the government and the army will hold in an organized resistance and avoid that?
Well, we organized our, let's say, compatriots for the probability of occupation. So our first opinion was what happens if our military is destroyed? And it's not a pessimism. Bigger military always destroys smaller military. This is the fact. And it's just a matter of time. So we decided we still have some time, which is bought with a high price, which is paid by our soldiers, active duty soldiers. And we should use this time in order to create a network, which will be absolutely difficult to put down, eradicate. And that is something which you cannot beat with tanks, with air power. Yeah, it's just pointless. So you have no target to deliver a hit. Yeah, because it looks like
swarm tactics. You sting your big enemy from different directions and you run away. And you continue with your civilian life, actually. So no rules for this phase of war. But as for the foreseeable developments, I can see that he already used his best assets. Now he has the only option is to declare full mobilization. And in this way, he can win two things. The first, to fill the ranks, yes, in his military, his invading force. And the second, mobilization usually is entailed with a curfew, with martial law and other pleasantries, which will not allow the people of goodwill, there are some, not many, to protest, just to take to the streets, even peacefully. So plus the younger group of those people who can present some danger to Putin's regime, they will be put in military uniform and sent here, together with subjugated nations like Belarus now, and others. So that's what can continue. Plus, Putin has not achieved his goal. I believe his ultimate goal was to set puppet government. His smaller goal was to split Ukraine along, for example, the Dnipro River, and to establish, let's say, his own absolutely controlled government in Kharkiv. That's why he bombards it so heavily. So I believe, you know the history, so
yeah.
there was Bolshevik uprising, so-called Bolshevik uprising. There were actually Russian forces which took Kharkiv and proclaimed it their first capital. And the first capital moved to Kiev, the historic capital, and you know what was the result, and it was a tragic result. So we do not want that to happen again. So we are going to do everything and to do our best in order to prevent that. So Putin has not achieved his goal, and that lesser option for him is to transform Ukraine into North and South Korea. So for him, it's also the way out, because it can give him at least opportunity to keep the face. Like, I did what I wanted. I still have a buffer zone between us and the NATO member countries, something like that. So usual rhetoric.
So what do you think about President Zelensky's performance and the military's performance compared to what you thought might have happened on day one? Because you did leave the capital because things looked tough, you know, on day one, because the government was unprepared. How would you rate President Zelensky before and now after the war started?
Well, as a teacher, I believe that he performed not in a good way during the time which he had. And that time was used for some populist projects like building roads, which now used by Russian tanks, you know, and something like that. I believe that that time could have been used more efficiently with developing this system of territorial defense. I repeat, this system. What we have now is forces of territorial defense, but not the system. System replicates itself. Territorial defense forces assembled can be disbanded, you know, that's the difference. So we still need that. Also, anti-collaboration law, it should have been introduced much earlier. Plus, law on firearms. Maybe you remember that Belarus, not a leader, okay, so-called president in quotation marks, he mocked our territorial defense forces for training with wooden or plywood dummies of Kalashnikov assault rifles, and it was pitiful for me, because I believe that training for several years with territorial defense, it enables me to receive that assault rifle from my government and to keep it at my home, and in time of emergency I just grab it and go to the assembly point. But if you go to the assembly point barehanded, this assembly point can be easily transformed into a trap, for patriotic people. That's why I believe that he lost a lot of time. Plus, also the defense procurement order, it was neglected for 2 years. Now what we have, lack of rockets, strategic and tactical rockets like Viha and Neptune, anti-ship rockets. Well, a lot of time lost, and now we pay with lives of our people who, heroism of one person is usually a stupidity or negligence of the other person. So that will be my assessment. And now anyway, his rates were plummeting down. So now his rates are on the rise. Well, as long as he keeps Ukraine going and fighting and struggling, I fully support this guy. And I hope that he won't make any concessions like the previous president did, because making concession can cause explosion from within, and it definitely can destroy Ukraine. Because this time, people will never tolerate any concessions. Only war until it ends. I mean, the threat ends, and our territories should be fully liberated. I mean, Crimean Peninsula plus Donbass.
Yeah.
That's my point. And people like me, because performing duties of S1 officer, I interviewed a lot of them, and many of them came from different countries where they work, where they live, where they have comfortable lives, much better than in Ukraine, and they just forgot everything. And approximately actually it was only one case when one of those volunteers asked me, "Are we going to be paid?" And the next sentence was, "Because I'm the only breadwinner in my family, if something happens to me." So he was not asking for remuneration, like an employee, but it was a little bit different. So he was trying to justify this request. I'm the only one, so my family depends on me. See, that was something. And also when you see a father and son in civilian clothes, they come to you and ask how to operate Kalashnikov assault rifle. And when you give them grenades, they look at those grenades, with square eyes, okay, give me back, maybe later.
Yeah.
But determination, what I'm trying to say, I see the determination. And you cannot fight that. It's impossible.
Yeah.
Weapon can fight that.
So what's the average age of people in your organization? Would you say it's people 40 plus, or what's their typical age?
18. For example, most of the guys who pull sentry service, sentry duties, mostly 18, 19, 20. Some of them are students, some of them just graduates, school graduates. And when you look at them, young guys holding, actually I pay attention to the way they grab the gun. And they are not trembling, they are not hesitating. And also I'm supposed to ask the question, who should we contact in case if you get wounded or die? None of them took it, like a frightened way. All of them who don't know, maybe not mother. I don't want my mother to hear it first. Maybe my sister, my friend, and when he or she delivers that message, it will be easier for my mom. Just don't call my mother. So now you can see and understand the attitude.
Yeah. And that's a very important point. Notifications of people that have been killed. How does the Ukrainian army do that? I know in the American army, that's a huge responsibility for the officer who's in charge of the unit in the back to go tell the family, the spouse or the parents. How is that handled in your organization and the Ukrainian army in general? Well,
this burden we share with the Ministry of Veterans Affairs. So it's not only task which we deal alone. our primary goal is to provide as many fighters, I don't call them soldiers, fighters, to the units, mostly volunteer units. So sometimes we attach them even to regular forces, military forces at their request, but not often. Usually we attach those forces at the request of, we call them, according to our law, volunteer formation of territorial community. That's how it is called. So such territorial communities, after amalgamation, they decide on the candidates for the commander. And it's really good because it's like back in Cossack times when commander was chosen right for campaign, and after campaign he could have been chosen again according to his performance, or maybe even killed for bad results. You see, so we turned back to those times.
Kind of like gambling. High risk, high reward.
Exactly.
Yeah. So how do we help your organization? I put in the notes, your bank accounts for euros and US dollars. Where do you get your funds?
Well,
how can more funds help your organization?
We have a lot of sympathizers, both in Ukraine and in other countries, including the United States of America. But I believe that maybe the greatest help can be in a way of unblocking the law, which I believe is blocked in the United States. I don't know the reasons exactly, but which enables the United States to support resistance movement around the world, and in particular in Ukraine. That will open more possibilities for us, more military technical support on behalf of the United States. And anyway, we are grateful to American people who actually supported us, so we express our full-hearted gratitude for all that technical support, advisory missions, special forces training, and a lot of other stuff, which I don't even know. But I can see the results. I can see the results. I see what Javelin is doing in Ukraine in order to teach the good behavior, good manners, those bastards which aim civilian buildings, civilian blocks, hospitals, kindergartens. You know that we parents, we have chats at school, at kindergarten, and a day or two ago, I received a notice from a teacher of my son who said that one of our school guys, the age was 8, who was killed by Russian armored vehicles. So there were 2 cars trying to run away and to evacuate from Kiev, and they were just shot. I don't understand that. So they present no danger. 2 civilian cars, only 1 person survived. So, and that happens every day. So you see an example with that power plant, nuclear power plant. You just imagine the damage which was caused by Chernobyl nuclear power plant can be multiplied like 6 to 1 because there are 6 reactors. And it's not like a case with Chernobyl. Mostly, I can compare it to Fukushima style, because you know that when fighting started and the Russian troops assembled around 100 armored vehicles and they overrun our barricades, one of the shells got into the reactor. I believe it was first reactor. No, first the first reactor. And what happened next? It set that reactor on fire. Luckily for us, the state emergency service of Ukraine was allowed to extinguish the fire. Otherwise, it can melt down the core and cause a huge radioactive contamination. So, and those guys, I mean, firemen, they did their job at, with Russian guns pointed at them. You can only imagine that situation.
Yeah.
So they did their job well. They extinguished the fire, and I believe that there are no leaks of radioactive materials. But who knows what can happen I believe that such act of terrorism, I can hardly find other word, was the only one aim, is to use it as a leverage against us when Kiev and Putin expects us to sit at the negotiating table, and not only us, the European Union countries as well, because radioactive materials and radiation, if it is released, it spreads all over the place. It can be taken with the wind even to Paris, Berlin, and other capitals, as well as who knows. So this is our case, and Putin knows that, and he's still determined to do that. Maybe it's like a last card in his sleeve or something, but this is very desperate.
Yeah. Well, Sergey, it's been really great to hear your story, and also I'm just like my friend Yuri. I'll bring Yuri on next from the Territorial Defense out in Belohorodka. I'm amazed by people like you, citizen soldiers who, you know, you're an English teacher in normal life, you know, willing to drop everything and serve, and more importantly, be very open about what you're doing, because you know that
my family bet on the 14th, so I'm well prepared. And if I knew, I believe the president had known as well.
Yeah.
Why not to tell your people? That's the question, as a famous writer Shakespeare says. Yeah, that's the question. And maybe one more request, if I can. Like all Ukrainians are now plead for NATO enforced no-fly zone. This is the only thing which I would ask, because we can cope with the planes, but we can hardly cope with the missiles and rockets, which just rain on our cities and kill innocent civilians. That's the problem.
Yeah. Well, Sergey, it's great having you on. I look forward to having you back again. If you ever have anything that's interesting to share, whether it's just activities, new initiatives, or just how people from your country can support you, or how the movement's going, we'd love to hear from it. I'm very interested to hear how it goes when this ends, because the political leaders certainly need to listen to people like you and your movement in any negotiation, because you've made it clear what your organization would stand for. And yeah, I look forward to seeing this play out. You definitely are having an impact out there with your team.
Well, thanks for having me. Together we win.
Yes, and
as well as free world.
Yeah, exactly. And the whole free world that I know, as divided as it can be in America and Europe and Great Britain, I don't think it's been more united in a long time. And I give all the credit to the fighting men and women of Ukraine and the president, who was smart enough to stand with them.
Yeah.
And brave enough to stand with them, because that's been missing in past presidents.
That's true.
All right. Thanks a lot, Sergey. And I'm going to finish this with, and you're welcome to stay on as I do this, because I do this every time. I want to give a roll up of what we see in the news. My fiance, Katya, and I, we're avid researchers now as a historian. And Sergey, you appreciate this. I'm a Russian Ukrainian historian, history teacher. I love researching and giving the story as I see it, looking at the primary source materials. I follow great journalists like Ilya from Kiev Independent on Twitter, and other Russian military analysts, Ukrainian military analysts, and I'd like to put it all together. So I'll just go over that news here. Hold on just 1 second. And
it's like it's job for teachers to teach them a lesson.
It is, and I've got a great teacher's assistant, because I was a horrible teacher when I didn't have a teacher's assistant. But anyway, so first things first, the president of France actually now believes that Putin aims to seize all of Ukraine. And I think Sergey, you knew that a long time ago, but I'm glad the president of France understands that that's what President Putin wants after a 1.5 hour conversation yesterday.
Better late than never.
Yes. This is your foreign minister, foreign secretary. He said the Russian army last night was firing at all sides on Zaporozhye nuclear power plant, the largest nuclear power plant in Europe. A fire broke out, and if it would have blown up, which it didn't due to the courageous firefighters, it would have been 10 times worse than Chernobyl. And this is what Rob Lee, a prominent Russian military and political analyst, has said. JP Morgan said on Thursday, it's expected that Russia's economy will contract 35% in the second quarter and 7% in 2022, with the economy suffering an economic output decline comparable to the 1998 crisis when the Russian currency and basically economy collapsed. Russian assets are under selling pressure today. They've still not opened the Russian stock exchange after an entire week. They're going to keep it closed for another 2 days next week. Putin, according to Timothy Ash, is literally bankrupting Russia financially and morally for this war that he's having a hard time even capturing any Ukrainian cities. Romeo Kokriatsky says, the more I see of Russians' operational capabilities, the more convinced I am that corruption in Russia must be at such a corrosive level that the military itself is, if not a paper tiger, mostly made out of the same rotting steel as the abandoned factories across the country. And you keep hearing about this massive column northwest of Kiev that's going to storm the city. And it now appears that Ukrainian forces have cut off the Russian column also from the west side and created a strong foothold in that area. Encirclement, he predicts, is actually inevitable. So Ukrainian special forces and regular forces are even counterattacking against this famous column that never seems to arrive. And the more I see of Russia's operational capabilities, according to Romeo, oh, I already said that. And then according to Kiev, 3 assassination attempts on President Zelensky have been foiled in the past week, thanks to leaks from Russia's FSB. And Russia's FSB is what Vladimir Putin came from. That's the successor to the KGB. And this is some shelling in Zhytomyr, the results of some shelling. And this is the results of bombardment in Mariupol. And these are the streets of Kharkiv right now. Beautiful, the second largest city, really the cultural heart of Ukraine, intellectual capital of Ukraine with their universities. And this is in Gostomel, a combat group of Ukrainian special forces and fighters, Kadakovsky and Stalker from the battalion of Dushmans burned 4 B&Bs. So that town of Hostomel here is the airport that was seized northwest of Kiev on the first day by the Russian soldiers. Still is trading hands and right now under control of Ukrainian special forces. And the Chechen fighters, the Kadrovites, according to this reporter Roman, says, I'm not telling you the location. You should have seen how they scrambled. Now they're sitting somewhere in the woods. The guys are conducting a cleansing operation and continue the offensive. So the Chechen assassins that have been supposedly coming for President Zelensky are getting chased into the woods by Ukrainian armed forces.
Доброго дня, ми з України.
Вот вони, це вони, завойовники, прийшли на нашу землю. Вони кидають свою техніку та вйовують. Так буде з кожним. Ми вистоїмо нашу землю. Слава Україні! Героям слава!
Героям слава! Отак от наші козаки виганяють загарбників, танки кидають, Збройні сили України дають справжню відсіч ворогу.
And these are special forces, again, Ukrainian special forces destroying Russian airborne vehicles in Irpin.
Короче, только что вручную разъебашили колонну. Четыре коробки, бля, средних. Пока держимся.
Ukrainian armed force estimates of Russian combat losses. You could see here 939 armored personnel carriers, 251 tanks, and 9,000 soldiers, personnel. And one of the interesting things about this statistic is if these numbers are true, this is over 25% of Russia's combat power, meaning the 100 plus battalion troops that were invading Ukraine, over 92% of them now have been committed, and over 25% of the vehicles, according to the Ukrainian counts, are destroyed. And you can see a number of aircrafts continue to be shot down. The Russian Air Force, which everyone thought would dominate the skies on day 1 or 2, the Ukrainian Air Force is still flying, still bombing Russian troops and Russian planes out of the sky. In fact, a lot of experts believe that Ukraine, with its small air force, still has what they call air superiority, which is amazing. It's contested airspace, but Ukraine seems to be fight, which would answer the question, where is the Russian Air Force? And these are residents protesting against occupying forces in Medpol. And Russian lawmakers are actually starting to confront the losses that they're facing right now.
Вчера из зоны боевых действий было выведено как раз вот те самые срочники, которых или заставляли подписать контракт, или за них подписывали. Но только в итоге из роты 100 человек живых осталось 4.
And this is how the Western media is treating President Putin and President Zelensky. And who's going to finally rid the world of President Putin? The implication is that he is not ever going to stop himself unless someone makes him. And that is him portrayed by the Sun as an extreme gangster. And President Putin has vowed that he's going to continue until total victory, which probably means total victory for Ukraine if their losses keep up like they've been going. And this is just a little bit of fun here. President Putin and Lukashenko's engagement photo, which I thought was good. They do look so happy together. And finally, President Klitschko here, or sorry, not President Klitschko. Little bit of a slip in case President Zelensky falls down, maybe President Klitschko, but Mayor Klitschko. And then finally, our dear friends at Anonymous, I'm going to end with their videos. I'm always entertained by their message to Putin and the increasing cyber assaults from around the world. Ukrainian hackers at the forefront, obviously, from all over the world, but just any computer developer seems to be getting in on it. All right. Well, I guess that wasn't an anonymous video, but I still like Anonymous and their attacks on Putin. Actually, Anonymous has been hacking into Russian television and broadcasting the truth about the war. And I got to hand it to you, Sergey. Your country is winning the information fight. And I think having an entertainer as a president has been very helpful in this war. And, you know, we'll see if that holds. But I think Russia has definitely lost the information narrative to the point catastrophically against the West. And Ukraine needs to keep piling on that advantage. And you know, you're a big part of that with what your group does. And, you know, I appreciate, you know, what you're doing for Ukraine and getting it free so we can all move back there. And my friends can go check it out for the first time, and I'm sure they'll want to move there too.
Well, that's why I go with open face. That's why I go with my real name, to show them that I'm not afraid of them. Neither me,
Yep.
no other men and women of Ukraine.
Yep. I commend you for that. And my friend Ivan here, a former U.S. artillery officer. I know a lot of people here who are watching and you know, want to support you. So appreciate you sharing and your honesty, transparency, and I'll see you in Kiev hopefully soon. And looking forward to you know, I live right by Taras Shevchenko University where you teach. So
Really?
I look forward to, yeah. All right. Thank you, Sergey. And thanks everyone for joining another episode of the Borderlands Show. And, you know, Sergey, all the best. And we hope to speak to you soon.
Thank you, sir.